I want to thank everybody for taking the time out to join us today. Where our discussion today is around what you should be asking before you do your upgrades from AX to D365. And the format we've picked today is what I'm going to call the Fast Five. And these are, there's so many questions regarding this upgrade process that hopefully what we've learned and can pass along to you will allow you to fine tune those questions. One of the things, that really struck me and kind of spurred me to start digging deeper into this, the process of these AX to D365 upgrades, is this is like nothing I've ever seen in 30 years in the ERP space. And, working with multiple products, mid-market products, so, bigger products, what's happening here to me seemed so unique and so different. And the experiences we were having with customers and prospects was so different that the idea was, let's dig into this and figure out, what's going on here. And the more we dug into this and the more we worked, on these upgrade projects, the more information started coming out that I thought would be important and useful to share with folks. So that was the idea here. So the thing I want to say here is that the information that we have gathered here, this is not a Microsoft marketing pitch. This is based on actual projects, and 6 completed podcasts and blogs that we've done with MS Dynamics World, and hopefully you've gotten a chance to take a peek at some of these. So this is what I found was that all the material that's readily available on the internet and folks that you could speak to about this process is it fell into one of 2 categories. It's either really highly technical regarding very specific bits and pieces of this upgrade process, or it's completely marketing of nature, right? Everything's wonderful, everything's gonna be great, everything's simple. So my interest really was, let's grab the information, for those folks in the middle, the business, right? The folks that actually have to, do these projects, work on these projects, pay for these projects, live with the end result of these projects, right? The folks that run the business. So my thought process here was, let's pull together information that hits those people and is most useful, for those folks. And one of the things that we're hoping, to do with all of these points that we have here is to give you some real stories, from the front lines of actually having to do this. So let's jump right into this. Number one, what surprised me was that because there is a big, obviously the D365, everything about D365 is a move to the cloud, right? From Microsoft, this is the, great new frontier. This is where we're going. This is where everybody has to be. This is great, for all these different reasons that Microsoft enunciates of why, the move to the cloud is the obvious move to make. But the thing that interested me was how many folks that we have talked to about this project that actually considered the various platforms that are available to them, right? What are our cloud options? What does that mean? What is the on-prem, right? What does that mean to us? And then, we very quickly started what I call these hybrid, considerations. The first thing that sticks out to me is intentionally or unintentionally, it is very expensive to run this stuff on premise, right? And so the amount of servers and the amount of technology, the infrastructure that you have to literally run to do this on premise or, in your own, private type of cloud is kind of daunting when you take a look at the hardware required and the amount of hardware and the cost associated. So that really struck me. The next thing that's really readily available is if you go out on public Microsoft sites and compare the functionality available to you on premise versus in the cloud, you see this fairly lengthy list. And on the one side, you see all the check marks for all the things that you can do on D365 in the cloud. And on the other side, it's incredible how many blanks there are on things that you can't have if you do the D365 on-premise. Now, this could be a question of it's just harder to do both, or they're, naturally trying to push people to the cloud. And, maybe you're never going to get that stuff for some technology reasons. I don't know right now, but it's certainly something that, stuck out to me. Well, a real funny story about one of our actual upgrade projects is when they were reviewing the difference between their platform options of should they stay on premise or should they go to the cloud, because these folks had some security, industry security requirements where they really took a serious look at, at running this on premise. And as we were kind of going back and forth, costs and, all these highly technical, requirements and things that, lean one way or the other, trying to come up with these, this analysis and these checklists. What was really funny was that, I don't know if it's still the case right now, but we found that reports could not be generated on the on-premise version to Excel. And it required a third-party add-on, and reports could only go to PDF. They could not automatically be exported to Excel. And the minute the, one of the accounting execs on this client heard that Excel export function, they basically called the end to the on-premise option. So to me, it was really funny, but it kind of shows you how sometimes even, the smallest bit of functionality or technology can really drive a decision. Now, on a more serious note, this hybrid platform, and what that kind of means is that you're not all in the cloud and you're not all on premise. And the best way to explain that is if you're, for example, a retail store with point of sale, or you have data collection devices in your warehouse or on your shop floor. The lag of data going from that, data collection device or point of sale device going directly, to the cloud, right, back and forth, the lag on that sometimes is so significant that your devices time out, or you're no longer getting real time, and you have all kinds of issues. And so anybody that's running this kind of enterprise type of solution with retail, multiple locations, shop floor devices, there's a real hard look you have to take at how this has to be engineered so that whatever devices you have that are in your plant or in your office, whatever, or in your shop floor, or how fast those are, going back and forth between the cloud and your, and your plant or your shop or your storefront, and whether or not you're supporting a realistic, environment. Something that a lot of people overlook because it's something that everybody doesn't consider or is aware of, but it's something that we have found is a critical functionality that you have to take a look at. Number 2, upgrade or re-implement. This is an interesting one as well, because this is an entire webinar worth of discussion because of the intricacies of all the different things that you have to look at and all the decisions, the possible decisions that you have to make here. So trying to focus on some of the higher level ones is initially, if you take a look at the version of AX you have, you may be too many versions behind and you can't automatically upgrade. You would have to go through multiple upgrades to get to the, to get to the point where you could upgrade to the D365. So at that point, the economic decision might be very straightforward. We just need to do a re-implementation versus doing multiple upgrades because of the cost and, other factors that we have. But definitely the first thing you need to take a look at is, if you're looking at an upgrade, is, which version of AX are you on, and whether you would require multiple upgrades or not. The next one, and probably the most obvious one, is the level of customizations, right? And that comes into play in a variety of ways, right? One thing is maybe you made a bunch of customizations that, subsequent versions of the software actually took care of what you had to do a customization for in an earlier. And so how do you know, how does that move from where you're doing a business process that was, customized before, but now it's a standard function perhaps in a D365 environment. And now you're in a situation of, well, how does all this stuff that we did here and the data it created and the transactions on and on and on, and the data fields that we may have added, how do we move that over, right? It could be very, very complicated. So level of customization, is a critical thing to look at. Next big one, and this is, this is something that people ignore even in, when they buy new software and implement. Nobody looks enough at the state of their data, right? Why upgrade dirty data, right? Or custom data? The upgrade or a reimplementation of an a new ERP implementation, that's always that opportunity to clean stuff out, right? Why drag the same bad data that you have, up to your new system? Why not use this as the opportunity to, to clean that? And besides the cleaning, you may also be in a situation where you've heavily modified your system and you've got a bunch of data out there and a bunch of transactions, based on, business functionality that you've created that now in the new system has no place to go. So, what do you do with that, right? So then there's a whole, lengthy discussion around ISVs. And one of the things that we have found to be quite interesting here is that especially customers that have a lot of ISV, solutions, if you're an enterprise company, you're probably using a lot of different ISVs. One of the things that we found out that, that stamp of approval for Microsoft for the ISV, on their marketing page, that, they work beautifully, with the new, the version of the software is not always the case. I think being in the ISV world is probably, as tough right now as actually doing one of these upgrades, except that they're doing, upgrading constantly. So you're really going to have to take a look, very carefully at your ISV solutions and have they actually had success on doing these upgrade projects. One of the funny stories that we had was that good size enterprise customer taking a look at doing one of these upgrades and using the opportunity to get rid of customizations, right? They were sick and tired of all these customizations they were forced to do, quote unquote, back in the day when, during another regime, during, other partners they had, and, they did a bunch of stuff that they really shouldn't have done and they broke things. And what they were just happy to do is let's get up to the latest and greatest version of vanilla software and use that. So you come into the internal issue of here is the project that we're going to run. We're going to take what we have now and we're going to upgrade it, right? And when we started looking at the detail, technical aspects of that upgrade, what we quickly found was that there's really no way that these guys could do an upgrade from a technical standpoint. Their modifications were so intrusive and had so broken their software that there was no logical way for us to do an upgrade. And so what we had to do is we had to say, look, we got to do a reimplementation. Interestingly enough, internally, the management team was not going to sign off on that. So literally from the internal story to the management, this was a upgrade project that technically speaking, behind the scenes, their IT department was not doing an upgrade, but rather a reimplementation. So just an interesting, I thought that was fascinating, because sometimes you have things that, create your decisions on how you're doing stuff that, are unusual. Number 3, this to me was a very surprising option. And this kind of hit us. Pretty hard with a really good-sized long-term customer of ours. What I would consider your classical, mid-market enterprise type customer with multiple locations, manufacturing, distribution, multiple countries, lots of integrations with, with legacy systems, just, your real heavy duty, serious implementation with lots of moving parts to it. They had an interesting background where they'd had some issues previously with partners doing work for them, and so their management team basically forced them to go out, and they interviewed 12 partners to take a look at what the upgrade process was going to look like and what it was going to cost. And so they interviewed and did detailed discussions with 12 different partners on what they were going to do. And the surprising answer from them was they weren't going to go to D365. That what they were going to do is they were going to take their current AX software implementation and upgrade it to the latest and greatest AX R3 vanilla. Their thought process was that from everything that they learned, is that the vast majority of the partners that they talked to, there was incredible amounts of pressure on them to move to D365. And they didn't understand, where that pressure was coming from, right? And that for them became a red bell, right? A red light, a flashing red light, because they didn't understand why there was this heavy pressure to move up to D365. That combination, along with talking to some other partners and the feedback they were getting, they felt that they were on the cutting edge of this upgrade process, and that the answers that they were getting and the feedback they were getting from other folks that were doing this had them worried that they were on the cutting edge and they were basically, going to be a beta site, right? And then the nail in the coffin was at a user group meeting, and probably one of the best AXUG user groups in the country. A room full of, I believe it was 40 to 50 different companies. They asked the question, how many folks in here are currently on AX versus D365? And the D365 companies were new installs. And so the question then to the AX folks in the room, which was the majority of the folks there, was how many are planning, to do an upgrade? And not a single person raised their hand. So that got them, to thinking, wow, we're not alone here. And what we're going to do is our upgrade is going to be to the latest, greatest, most stable version of AX, and put off that D365 project until we find it's more stable and there's better answers for us on our legacy integrations. So a surprising option, but something that not unusual as we talk to folks. Our next big finding that we have found is there is a huge discrepancy from partner to partner on the project estimates and the costs involved with this. And one of the things that we're finding is that due to the success of Microsoft and the D365 market space, the vast majority of resources in these bigger partners that have these close relationships with Microsoft is the focus is really on what I call the net new market. That is going out, selling new great big deals and installing those effectively as best as possible. And here's where we suffer from the success of the product and Microsoft's marketing muscle. With all of these partners having this great success going out selling new deals, what ends up happening is the focus on these upgrade projects is kind of a side business, right, or an afterthought. And oftentimes what we're finding when we speak to folks is that the level of resources that are being assigned to the upgrade projects, they're not consistent, and they're kind of the the last guys on the bench, right? So that leads to, these issues where, if this is not a focus, right? If this is not a focus, then what do those project estimates and costs really look like, right? And so you run into these situations where it's, oh, let's throw out a really big number, and if if it scares them, then it was not a project we were meant to have. Or if they say, fine, we'll figure out a way to do it, right? Or the classic, let's give them a decent number that they can, work with, and then what are they going to do, right? What are they going to do when we're halfway through the upgrade project? You're kind of stuck with the deal. What we have found is that in estimating these projects, it's really critical, and as some of my technical folks talk to me about, that it's all about the objects that have to be upgraded, right? And so objects are, for the, I'm not a technical person, so objects are explained to me as, forms, reports, classes, custom objects, custom integrations, and custom functionalities. And what happens is there's various numbers of all of these, so there's multiple types of forms, multiple types of reports, on and on, that exist in your current system. And you have to go take a look at those very carefully to find out, to be able to estimate that to do that upgrade estimate, very carefully. The thing that we find is that a lot of these, the project estimates that we've seen, not only do they swing wildly, from a low number to a very high number, they're very inconsistent. The project plans are all over the place, indicating to me that there is not, a really good set of standards where people have done this over and over and understand how this process works, right? So one of the projects that we've done, and one of the really surprising things that as we're looking out here and trying to accurately assess what these upgrade costs are, is we have an implementation that a couple of years ago spent X number of dollars to get what I would consider a very straightforward GLAPAR, G-L-A-P-A-R, nothing fancy in the manufacturing distribution world, implementation, and went well. Not that not that high level of sophistication as far as integrations and all that stuff, just a real good solid implementation. And a couple of years ago, they spent X number of dollars to get the system up and running. 2 years later, we're doing an upgrade for them, and our starting upgrade quote / cost was 2 times that implementation cost, right? And to us, as we're going through the details of what had to be done, and then tallying up the hours and sitting down with the client and explaining to them what had to be done, it was all very, straightforward and, non, exceptional, until we came back and thought to ourselves, oh my God, this is incredible that 2 years ago, it was half to do this, and now the starting point of this is twice that amount, right? And as you know, as we started going through the project and they start surfacing more and more things that they want to do, that 2 times number is easily going to go to 3 and 4 times, and we're doing a good job and the customer is happy with what we're doing. So the cost of these projects, I think, is going to overwhelm a lot of folks. And it's the kind of thing that you have to look at very, very carefully at the front, because you may be getting that low end quote that is nowhere realistic, and you're going to be stuck in a lot of trouble. You're going to be in a lot of trouble if you're halfway through that project and there's no money left to finish that off, right? And the one thing that I want to tell folks is that my guaranteed rule for no scope creep on these types of projects is very simple. Just don't do it, because there is absolutely no way, without starting a project like this and actually going through the process of doing a project, that you can vet out all the things that you will need to do. So big cost. Cost is a big issue here on these upgrades, and you want to take a look at it very, very carefully. Make sure you have the budget to do this correctly. All right, where are we? Number 5, Microsoft. I titled this slide, Making It Up as We Go Along, right? The thing that nobody expects when they go through this project and they've looked at the marketing materials and they've talked to their Microsoft reps is how much changes on a day-to-day basis, okay? Literally on a day-to-day basis, and nobody knows what just happened, and people are reacting to changes that they were not able to anticipate. That's the first thing. The other thing is, if as a customer or a partner or a consultant, anybody working in this industry for any amount of time, the cloud changes everything. And it's the nature of the beast of the way that this new product is set up, that access to the data, access to your environments, the ease of modifications, all those things that you loved about AX, those have all changed completely and dramatically. So it is a complete relearning, and of the tools that you use, how you do things, and the things that you're actually able to do, right? So where you pretty much had total control of the system before, and environments and tools, etc. Now things are so locked down that it's a completely new mindset, and you really have to appreciate going through one of these upgrades to understand how that changes the way you're working with this ERP solution. The speed and quality of technical support that we have received, when we run into these issues that nobody's ever seen or heard of before, is an issue. And you have to, in your mind, wrap yourself around, around the fact that specific problems and issues that you have, it may take a certain amount of time and a certain number of repetitions before you find somebody that has a good answer for you. The thing that people will try to sell you is that your environments and everything having to do with the technical aspects of one of these implementations is controlled by that LCS interface, right? And so two things about that. On the surface, when you take a look at the way the LCS is described, as kind of your portal, your admin portal for controlling your D365, what you think about is, oh yeah, we have Office D365, and there's an admin place where you go in, you add users, and you drop them off, and you do all these kind of cool things, and it's it's kind of clunky, and you got to figure out what you're doing, but everything that you need to do, you do in there, right? So that's kind of the thought process that, well, when I go to D365, I'll just have this admin thing. It's going to be called something else. It's going to be called LCS, but I'm going to be able to go in there, maneuver, do all this kind of stuff. Completely 100% incorrect. First of all, LCS is there's a heavy lift there as far as going in there and making sure you do everything right so that when it's time to turn the switch on and go live, that the lights actually go on, right? So one of the things that we talk to, with our, customers and prospects is it makes almost no sense for you to try to have somebody to understand or learn LCS, because it's going to be a one-off, and there's a chance that you're going to do something so wrong that we're going to have this huge do-over event that's going to cost us all, right? So that's the first thing. You really want to be able to rely on somebody that knows how to use the interface and use that tool. And the second thing is that you have to be able to actually step outside of the LCS to be able to work with Azure. And that's something that we didn't anticipate, right? We didn't we thought, yeah, sure, you got to be able to work outside the LCS. We didn't understand the level of complexity and sophistication that you had to have to understand how this D365 Dynamics D365 F&O worked and interfaces with the Azure environments on how all that stuff works. And the interesting thing is you can get the brightest, smartest, phenomenal Azure resource, and you say, hey, I got this and that problem, and they'll ask you, what's Dynamics? Because for the Azure folks, the Dynamics piece is just a small piece and a new piece. So for us, the folks that understand the D365 ERP F&O solution, Azure and how all those work together, for us, those are unicorns. Very hard to find and very rare. So that's something that you really have to be able to appreciate. So making up as you go along here, lots of changes, fast and furious. This thing may settle down for months and perhaps years, as some people fear. Tech support, all those folks, I think, are trying to keep up as well. And you've got to have some really strong technical capability on the LCS interface for the product and the Azure. Alrighty, those are my top 5. As I promised, I try to roll through those quickly and without too much hesitation. Ms. Carey, you've been monitoring things. Got anything out there that people are interested in?
I do. A couple of questions have come in. The first is just a further question on objects and how they affect the overall project cost.
Okay, that's a good question. So when we spoke before, objects are different. These different pieces of software code that exist in your current AX environment. So for example, it could be a custom report, right? Or it could be a really, a small piece of customization for business logic, or it could be this incredibly complex entire business process subsystem that requires, an incredible amount of understanding and, know-how on how it works in your current system and how it's going to work in a new system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for the folks that we've seen that will actually go out and take a look at how many objects exist that have to be upgraded, what we've seen is that a lot of the quotes and estimates is that they go out and they count the number of objects and they do what we call as a swag, a sophisticated wild arsed guess on here's this X number of report objects, and it takes us on average 4 hours or a day, whatever it is, to do a typical report. Multiply that by the number of objects, and there you have your quote. The thing that we have found with that is that it is brutally inefficient in coming up with an actual project estimate and cost, because the number of objects is only maybe that 20% of the answer. The 80% lies in the relative complexity of each object. And so one of the things that we've done is we have some software IP that goes out and crawls your system, actually looks inside of the objects and not only enumerates the numbers, but also tells you the level, relative level of complexity. And that allows you to make a much better estimation of the kind of effort you have in an upgrade. So just 2 things there. If somebody ignores, some kind of an object count, they don't have a serious quote. If they're just enumerating the numbers and then not giving some huge, what I call a fudge factor, plus or minus based on, the actual nature of those underlying objects, I don't think you're getting a good quote. If that was the, if that was the question, that's where I'm coming from. Hope that answers it.
The next question is, what is the main driver to go to on-prem projects? What do clients say they decide on going on-premise?
Say that again.
What is the main driver to go to on-prem projects? And what do clients say?
Yeah, sorry.
deciding?
Yeah. So the number one thing that we have found is business security requirements, where a company has made the decision that no how, no way is our company data sitting in the cloud anywhere. And we have X, Y, and Z requirements to put this and completely and totally control it. That is the number one, that's the number one issue that we've seen for staying on premise.
Okay, and then the last question that I have here at this time is, I'm interested in the cloud, but not sure if it's time to upgrade to D365. What are my best options?
It's kind of interesting because, we just had somebody, I kind of told a little bit about their story about that, and kind of intersect that with one of our podcasts coming up with a hosting company. And the interesting thing there is, I do believe that when all the excitement and the shininess of the D365, and everybody has to be in the cloud because you just have to be, right? And when I hear that you have to be in the cloud, sometimes it's because Microsoft has decided to tell everybody they have to be in the cloud because that's how they're going to make money, right? And obviously there are, great reasons to move into the cloud, for, the obvious, cost savings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing that I believe is that there is going to be a significant part of the market on AX where the best possible move they can make from a version standpoint is try to stabilize themselves on the latest and greatest version of AX, which is R3, because the features and functions that are in the R3 are fantastic, right? Tremendous amount of functionality there. Now, the good thing about that is, now a lot of people focus on it because everybody's racing, everybody's racing ahead and moving, into the D365 cloud. But there are some great hosting firms out there that will be able to lift that R3 AX implementation and put it in the cloud for you. So now you don't have any of the downside of doing that whole big upgrade to D365, and you still have all the great access and all the great things that you could do that you're familiar with AX, with the R3 version, but you also have the benefits of the cloud. So to me, I think there's going to be a fairly significant market of customers that not only upgrade to R3 instead of D365, and then there's going to be a portion of those that are going to want to take advantage of the cloud, and instead of rebuilding their infrastructure internally to keep up with the R3 requirements, they're going to find one of these great hosting partners and shift that processing load up into the cloud. So.
Alrighty, there's a follow-up question. Does the upgrade experience from Microsoft from R3 support ISV data migration as part of it?
That's what I have seen is that is a ISV by ISV specific answer. And one of the things that blew my mind in one of these projects that we're running is a fantastic ISV, just a really, really great, strong technical ISV that to me is, intrusive, but not super intrusive. So, they're working with the data internally to the system, but they're not, propagated throughout the entire AX. And when we included them in this project, they told us the following. They said, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to quote you X, Y, and Z to re-implement our solution when you move up to the D365, and you're going to lose all the transactions that you have up to there with us. And if you want us to do an upgrade instead, we're going to charge you like 20 times as much because we haven't done it and we're scared. Now I'm paraphrasing, but basically that was their answer. So you have to very carefully go ISV by ISV and really dig into, you know, the truth of what they're doing, and not look at the sales and the you know, market, not talk to the sales guys, and not look at the marketing literature, because the ISVs are, you know, from a technological standpoint, they're trying to keep up, just like you know, folks like us that are upgrading, helping folks upgrade and people going through the upgrade process.
All right, that's all of the questions that we have.
All right, hopefully I got through this stuff fairly quickly and efficiently and threw out some good stuff. Next steps, please follow the blog and podcast series. You can check it out either on MS Dynamics World. There are partners in doing these podcasts and blogs, or on our website at TurnOnDynamics. And if there's anything that we can discuss about your potential upgrade project, problems you're having with an existing project, you know, send me an email here, pjoeckel@TurnOnDynamics.